Okay, hello everyone. This is National Master Dennis Monokroussos, and tonight, or today, wherever you are, whatever time it is there, we're going to do something a little bit different. So instead of presenting one of my games, I thought I'd present a study that I composed many years ago. So this is from back in 1986, probably before some of you were born, but you know that's how it goes. Now, it's not especially great as a study, I would say, not being falsely modest, but I think appropriately modest. I would say it's more of an exercise, but it's kind of nice for an exercise, but a bit insufficiently aesthetic for a study. In any case, what I would suggest is that before you guys listen to the rest of this program, that you stop and really try to solve this. And I think it'll take you some time to really figure out best play for both sides. So it's a very good challenge. It took me quite a while to figure out what was best play for both sides. So this actually came about not by my trying to compose anything. I was simply, I think, playing out a position for both sides. You know, there weren't any good computers at the time, so that's kind of how you had to analyze. And so this position came up, and I don't remember what the result was when I was first playing it, but I was just intrigued by it, and I kept analyzing it more and more. And I think it took me a couple of sessions before I got to the bottom of it. And ultimately, my analysis of this was correct. So it's held up in the computer age. But as I said, it took me a while to figure it out. So let me challenge you guys to figure this out too. And I'll just add that I was a master at the time when I composed this. So it's not like I was just starting out. It actually did prove to be a challenging position even for a fairly experienced player. So have some fun with this. It's white to move, and I won't even tell you what the result is supposed to be. So you can figure that one out too. Alright, so I'll give you guys your chance to figure things out, and let's go ahead and start it now. Alright, so here's your last chance to bail out before I start to discuss the position. Okay, so here goes. Alright, most obviously, of course, white's up a pawn, but if you've worked on this, you'll have noticed that despite this, it's in fact white who's in trouble here. So it's really remarkable. White would be a lot better off if this pawn on f4, in fact, weren't there. So if it was white's move here and there's no pawn, or if you could just take it, king to f4 would put him in very good shape. In fact, white would simply be winning in that position. So kind of surprising, right? But in fact, this turns out to be true. And the key thing about this position is that, of course, it's black who has the space advantage, because his king will get to the to his fourth rank, the fifth rank on the board, while white's king can't get to his own fourth rank. So in fact, it's white who has to really struggle for the draw, and we'll see if he can in fact achieve this. Okay, well, the first move that might come to mind is king to f3. So we simply bring the king over. We'd like to put it on e4, and if we could do that, of course, then we'd probably be in pretty decent shape. Alright, so the key response is king to f5, and now white has a crucial decision to make. Do we go and stick with the pawns with king to g3, or do we try to play king e3 and kind of attempt to achieve some activity here? Well, as we'll see, in this particular case, it won't actually matter, but we can learn some important lessons as we work through these two variations. All right, so let's suppose that white plays king to g3. So we just try to stay in the middle of all of our pawns, not lose anything, just hold on to everything as long as we can. All right, well, black plays king to e4, and already we see that white is going to start bleeding pawns here. So we can either continue and play even more passively with something like, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. King to g2, just look at this quickly. King takes f4. And now it turns out that white again has to make some concessions. If he moves the king to h3, then he's simply going to lose the f-pawn. So king f3, king takes f2, and so on. That'll be an easy win. Whereas if white moves the king anywhere else, so he can stay in touch with his f-pawn, let's get rid of these arrows. If he goes, let's say, to h2, well, in that case, king to g4, and black wins the h-pawn, and will win the game in that variation as well. So, neither of those options is particularly attractive, so f3 is the only thing that's left. And now, black's easiest win is just to play king to e3. White plays king g3, f5, and 2 moves from now, white will have lost the f-pawn. And in fact, white's going to lose the h-pawn as well, should black decide he wants to win it. So for example, if king to g2, f4, king g1, king f3, and if nothing else, black can play king g3, king takes h4. Though, hopefully all of you recognize this pattern. So whenever the king is on its 6th rank in front of the pawn, it's an automatic win. So we don't have to bother with the h-pawn. It doesn't matter who has the opposition either. So the side with the pawn will always be able to regain it, as we'll see. So king g3, king g1, f3, king f1, f2, and black wins, and of course wins the game. Alright, so we can go back and note that if white tries to go into his shell with king to g2, it's hopeless. So let's try f5, an attempt to keep a little more space in the white camp here. Alright, so king takes f5, and now king f3. And so notice this position too, because we'll see something very much like it a little bit later. And now black plays f6. So he's got this spare tempo move. In this position, whoever moves is going to lose half a point relative to the situation if it was the other side to move. So if it's white to move, he loses. If it's black to move, it's a draw. Alright, in this position it's white to move, and so we can see the two different ways in which he loses. So again, as we had a few moves ago, white again has this choice, sticking with his pawns with king to g3, or going outside with king to e3. So again, we'll take a look at each of these in turn. So let's say king to g3, and again king to e4, and black's king is going to kind of crowbar its way in. And one of the repeated themes you're going to see throughout this analysis is that if the black king can get to the e4 square, it's pretty much guaranteed a win. So it's that square is kind of a pivot for the black king to be able to break in and enter into the white position. And once it's in, if the black king can get to f4, for instance, then he just wins all the pawns. So it's e4 is a square by which you can pretty much guarantee that he gets there. So white has to keep him off of e4. Alright, so as we'll see, king g3, king e4, king g2, king f4, and this is something we just looked at a moment ago. Again, if the white king moves, he'll lose one of the two pawns, and if he plays f3, then again king e3 followed by f5 will win quite straightforwardly. Okay, so that's what happens on king to g3. If instead king to e3, king g4, and now we'll see a neat defensive idea for white. It comes up short, but it's one that is worth keeping in mind for the future. So king to e4, king takes h4, king f5, king h3, king f6. There's no real point to playing a move like king to g6 here. One idea of this would be that if black plays something like h4, king h5, and conceivably there could be a zugzwang situation here. There isn't one here because black can push the f-pawn, but you'll notice that the black king, if it moves, it drops the h-pawn. So here again it's not serious because of the move f5, and then f4, and if we try to keep it, f3, and now we can abandon the h-pawn. So it's still winning for black. But the simpler way to proceed, and I think there are some variations where you do have to be careful here, is with king to g4. Alright, and so now if white takes the pawn, then simplest would be just king to f4, and then you promote. Alright, if f3 check, well, again here you can just take the pawn on f3, and you'll queen whichever pawn white doesn't capture next move. Okay, so king f6, king g4, king e5, and now king to f3. So we don't get into this race. The h4 would win also, but king to f3 is simplest. Alright, so in this variation, bringing the king to e4, well, first to e3 and then to e4 wasn't good enough, but it's an important idea to bear in mind. Okay, so in fact, let's go all the way back to here. So we already started with this. So had the starting position, did king to f3, king f5, and we just tried king to g3. Let's try king to e3 this time. And this one we'll see is actually quite a bit closer. So king e4, king g4, king e4. And here too, black has to be kind of careful. If he plays king takes h4, then king to f5, and I don't think this is good for black anymore. So I haven't actually just checked this in the last couple of minutes before doing this, but I think he's just in trouble here because king g5, h4, king h5, and now there's no. Well, black's king will get Zugzwang, so thanks to the extra f pawn, I think black even loses here. So f6, f5, and white wins. Or if f5, king to g5, and again, white simply wins here. So what this means is that king takes h4 is a serious error, probably a losing error. And the right move, though, is to play f6. So this is a strong move, and it does a couple of things. So first of all, if white abandons his f4 pawn, then black will simply and very happily capture it. If white plays, f5 is our main line, but say white plays something like king e3, well, again, the passive approach just fails. f5 and let's say f3 check, king g3, and black is going to win all three pawns. Take this one, and come back for that one as well if he wants it. Or instead of taking that, you can just run the f pawn all the way in. Okay, so the most interesting move, again, sees white trying to play actively. And this is another lesson to learn from this exercise, is that activity, even in a king and pawn ending, is more important than material most of the time, or at least much of the time. Of course, it depends on how much activity you've got. But we saw from the starting position, it's black who's a pawn down, and they're all on the same side of the board. And he's only got two pawns, and one's a rook pawn, and still, white is in tremendous trouble. And yet we're seeing here, too, variations where white just gives up a pawn, but if he can get his king sufficiently active, no problem. He's in okay shape, even winning sometimes. Okay, so f5 is the right move, fighting for his king's activity. All right, well, now black has only one move that makes any sense. King takes h4, and now white goes active, so king d5. He can't keep the black king locked in on the side of the board, so sometimes this is a useful technique. And the problem here, though, is after king h3, king f3, h4, white's king has to give ground. So next move is king to g2 for black, and then the next three moves after that are the h-pawn queening. So king to d5, king to g5, trying to hold on to the f-pawn, king e6, h4, f4 check, king f6, king f4, king f6. And now it's most unfortunate for white that he can't play king to g7 here. So this is worth knowing about. If, of course, black should just take the pawn, and that just wins. But let's say black played h2, queens, and we get to this position. Now, I believe this is this is normally a what am I saying? Let me just start this sentence over again here. Black is unable to win this unless his king is sufficiently close. So that's what I'm kind of a little bit unsure about. So I should perhaps know the boundary within which the black king can be at to achieve a win. But really, you just kind of figure this out over the board. And there are some cases where the king is close enough, and others where it isn't. And I think this is a position where it's not close enough. In any case, the key thing that I want to communicate, and I don't really care about the fine point of exactly how close the black king is that a f-pawn, a c-pawn, an h-pawn, or an a-pawn on the 7th rank will draw against a queen, in each case because of stalemate. Now, the nature of the stalemate differs in each case, but what is the same about all the cases is that at a critical moment, the king goes into the corner square where capturing the pawn, well, in the case of a c or f pawn, will lead to stalemate. So here's the basic procedure that'll take place. So let's say queen g2, king h7, the black queen winds her way in here. And now if it was a b pawn, a d pawn, an e pawn, or a g pawn, the king would have to step in front of the pawn, and each time it does that, then the side with the queen would bring the king closer and just repeat the procedure over and over again until the king was close enough to either win the pawn or give checkmate. But here, white plays king to h8, and that just draws because, again, the black king is too far away for there to be a mating net, and queen takes f7 is stalemate. Okay, So I just point this out for your edification. It's irrelevant to this study because, again, of course, after king to g7, black simply snaps off the pawn. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple other lines quickly. If king g6, then of course we promote. And here, this is crucial, we play queen to h8. So we don't allow the white king to get to g7. And in fact, here, of course, the situation is really bad for white because he's forced to just give up the pawn right away. I mean, his king is stalemated, so he has to promote, and then it's just obviously easy win, king and queen versus king. Okay, so that's no good. We can try king to e6, and this way we won't have that same stalemate situation. Unfortunately, the white king is too far away, and so here black does win. So queen h6, queen h7, king e5. So very good move here. Neat little trick. The point is that after f8 queen, king to e6, and this shows you what I was saying before about, the king has to be within a certain distance, and if it is, then there's a win. So that's what we have here. White's managed to queen, but he's faced with mate in 1, queen to d7, and there's nothing that he can do to stop that without either giving up the queen for nothing or allowing a different checkmate. So if he plays king to d8, he gets checkmated the same way. And he has no safe checks with this queen, so every queen check simply loses the queen, and there isn't even any way for the queen to cover d7. Alright, of course, it won't be mate once the queen is left, but there's no way to cover e7, and, well, there's too many, so let's just try this. So I'll quit suggesting things here and just show, okay, this, and now queen to f7 is mate. Okay, so you can look, but there's nothing for white to do here to survive. Okay, so that's kind of a close line. White just loses by a tempo, but sometimes the tempo is all you need. So I think I forget if it's Tarash or Tartikover who once said that chess is the tragedy of one tempo. Okay, well, this little excursion here is basically geared to show you that the move king to f3 is insufficient to hold the draw. Okay, another try is f5 check, but this we already in fact looked at. It just took us a couple of moves to get there. So f5, king takes f5, king f3, and again we've got the reserve tempo for black with f6, and king g3 loses to king e4, and king e3 loses to king g4, and again we already saw this. Game over. Okay, so well, what do we do then? So if f5 doesn't work and king f3 doesn't work, what's white to do? Well, what he needs to do is engage in tempo play. So the right move and the only move to keep alive, or at least potentially keep alive, is king to g2. So this is a very strong move. Now, the first point is that if black plays king to f5, now white plays king to f3, sorry, and after f6, this time black has expent his spare tempo. So we discussed this before, right? So we had it in this position. So going back to the beginning, if king to f3, king f5, see here, black still has that tempo, and he needs it for the position after king e3, king g4, king e4, f6. So he needs to have it here. Alright, so going back to this, so king to g2, king f5, king f3, f6, king e3. Again, not to g3. King to g3 is just always hopeless. King e4, black wins. So king e3, king g4, king e4, and here we have that same position. White to move loses, black to move is worse. So king takes, king f5, king h3, king f6, king g4, and now both sides promote. And I assume it's a table-based draw. I'm not sure if I've even checked it since there have been table bases, but I believe this is a theoretical draw. But of course now it's black who has to suffer. Just going to be down the pawn there. All right. So instead, after king to g2, king f5 right away is not any good. That's a simple draw. But instead, king to f6 is an attempt to be tricky, because now if white plays king to f3, well, we just transposed into the king f3, king f5 on move 1. So it just took us an extra move to get there. So white has to continue to be subtle here. So the right move is king to g3. Again, being ready to meet king to f5 from black with king to f3. Okay, so now we have a little shadow boxing going on. Black plays king to e6, again waiting for white to step on f3. So you can see these are what are sometimes called mined squares in the literature. You know, like you step on the square and you blow up kind of thing. So neither player wants to step on the mined square, the corresponding mined square, before the opponent does on his corresponding square. So you know, white doesn't want to go to f3 before black has played king f5, and vice versa. So once again, white can't play king to f3, and f5 is just as bad as it was on move 1. We'll just transpose to the exact same position. So he's got to play king to g2. Let me mention f3, because we haven't talked about that possibility either. So that's another losing variation, and the way this works is pretty straightforward. Black plays king to f5, king g2, king takes, king f2, trying to grab the opposition, but black simply plays f5, and again he kind of crowbars his way in. So he's got this little pivot again, and if king to g2, king e3, and again he just wins the pawns with a familiar pattern by now. And if white tries to be active here, that's not going to work either. It's just, you know, way too far behind in the race here. So king takes, king here, king h3, and now if king g5, probably the simplest is king to g3. Yeah, so if, well, black is just going to promote whichever pawn isn't captured, and he'll get there faster. So if this, you can see black is way ahead, and now we can use that same trick that I showed you guys earlier, but a rank further down the board, namely queen h7. So again, forcing white to cough up the pawn straight away. Okay. Oh, and if king takes f5, all right, this saves a tempo, but it's still a move too late. So king g3. And essentially, if the queen can get to the queening square, then it's just very simple. So that's a clear win for black. All right. Yeah. Okay, so that was f3. All right, so back here, so just to recap where we are, king g2, king f6, so white staying off f3, black staying off f5, king g3, king e6, king g2, and now king d5. So this is a new set of tricks. All right, so you might think, well, white doesn't want to go to play king f3 because we said that was a mined square. But remember, it's only a mined square if black can play king f5. Since black's king can't go from d5 to f5, it's slightly illegal, f3 is at least an available option that we need to consider. And if you recall what I had said before about the e4 square, that if black's king gets there, he's boss. He just rules the entire board. White really has no choice. He's got to take that square away. So that means either f3 or king f3. Now again, f3 is not going to work. And the best way to try to figure that out, or I'm sorry, to prove that, actually, you guys should maybe stop the recording and try to figure that out. So what's the right way for black to play? Should he play f5? Should he play king to d4? Something else? So see what you can come up with. Okay, so I'm again going to assume you've all worked it out, and I will now continue. So the best way for black to continue, maybe not the only way, but I think it's best, is king to e6. So we simply go back in front of the pawns again, and once more we've got that spare tempo that will rescue us in the critical position. So white should play a move like king to f2, king f5, and now whether white plays king to g3 or king to e3 doesn't really matter. And thanks to that spare tempo, black starts gobbling pawns. And in fact, he'll win all three of them if he wants. King g2. And again, we've got that spare tempo, so in we come. And, okay, yeah, this line, sorry, we already looked at this. Black is not going to win all three pawns. Well, he will, but he has to give up one in return. No, no. Okay. I'm speaking nonsensically here. Of course, this is just the winning ending, but he doesn't win all of the pawns, at least not yet. He'll win it down the road. And, okay, we've seen this already. So, the point of this is that f3 does not work. So white needs another defensive option. And the only thing that's left, as I mentioned, was king to f3, keeping the black king off of e4, but doing so in a way where he isn't losing the f-pawn just yet. Okay, well now we might still think that a move like f5 is best. And indeed, if white had to play king g3, well, we know this tune already. King e4, and black wins. So if f3... Actually, maybe this line is not a win. So I retract my claim here. So perhaps this is another draw. Okay, let me think about this for a moment, because I have my doubts as to whether white can actually draw. But maybe he can, with king to g3. I mean, we can try king to d4, but... Okay, king f3, king here. And, yeah, this isn't going to get any easier for white to win, or for black to win. In fact, here, it's just a draw by opposition. White's king will now shadow black's. In fact, maybe he can just go for a win, so maybe it's not a draw anymore. Maybe white even wins. So, okay. So king g3, king e4, f3. Alright, is there any finesse? Okay, king e3, king g2, king e2. There we go. So this is another useful technique. So outflanking, or in this case, it's not really outflanking. We're kind of we're getting in behind here. So it's not to the side, but it's from behind. Yeah, this is the win. So king g3, king f1, and next we start collecting f-pawns. Right, so yeah, the problem with the line that I was looking at before, of course, is that we have no spare tempi. So king takes f4, and here we need to have a reserve move to regain the opposition. The reason why I was a little confused for a moment is that we'll see later on there's a similar line where it looks like white has achieved the draw, but in fact hasn't. But here he has. All right, but the right move is not, is king e4, but after king g2, not to take on f4, but to play king e2. It's a strong move and wins. So king g3, king f1, and again, all the f-pawns leave the premises. Okay, so does this mean that f5 wins? Well, in fact, no, it doesn't. So now white plays king to e3. So again, not giving up the e4 square. Absolutely crucial. So black can try to turn the corner again with king to c4, but he's not going to quite get what he needs. So king e2, king d4, king f3, king g2. And the difference here is that, well, white's not playing f3. So without f3, there's not going to be any zugzwang. So this is in fact a draw. White does hold this position. Just by a thread, but it holds. Okay, so f5 doesn't work. f6 doesn't work either because of f5. So let's take a quick look at this one as well. Actually, no. King to e3 is the drawing move here. Yeah, so king to e3 is good because if the black king moves, then in fact white probably wins. And if f5, then king to d3, white has the opposition, draws easily. Okay, so f5 doesn't win, though it comes close. f6 doesn't even come close to winning. But king to d4 is another very interesting try. And so this is our main line here. Now, once again, if the white king moves to g3, it still loses by familiar means. King e4, and we've been here before. f3 check. King f5 here, it's okay because the f-pawn has some moves. And we win. Alright, so f5 is, in fact, the only move. So it's kind of funny, this pawn has been stuck in place, but here everything is just perfect. But all the we haven't eluded all the traps just yet. Okay, so black plays king to e5, and now okay, we might think, all right, king to e3. So this is the line that I think I was trying to recall earlier. Yeah, king takes f5. Now, if king to f3, f6 gains the opposition and black wins, whether white plays king e3 or king g3. So this is the same as f5 check, basically in the opening position. Some of the lines we looked at there. Okay, if he tries f3, king e5, f4, king f5, king f3, and here again it looks as if, yeah, this isn't the position I was thinking of either. Okay, so this is simple. f6, black wins. Okay, so king to e3 doesn't work. King g3 we know never works, and that leaves only really one move, f6. And now, of course, if black takes, white plays king f4 and he wins. So this is exactly the same thing as this position. All we did was just shift, which side gets to win. So a very, very amusing little thing here. So the exact same thing, and now white wins. Of course, what this means, though, is just that black should not take the pawn on f6, at least not yet. So the best move here is king to f5, and now white still has some problems to solve. So it seems incredible, but here too, king to g3 is losing, and it's not because of king takes f6. So again, king takes f6 is just an outright blunder. King f4. So we've already been here a moment ago. But white is going to be hit by the same winning idea that we've seen several times now. King to e4, king g2, king f4, f3, and now another nice little finesse here. If you play king to g3, king to e3, then you're not going to win. White simply plays king to g3. So we need to go back towards the f6 pawn, but it's important to do it the right way. So king to e5, king g3, and now again, not king takes f6 because of king to f4, but king f5. So very nice little finesse. So we cut the white king off and force the king to either go backwards or for white to push the pawn to f4. Either way, white's king won't have access to f4 on the next move, and black wins. So let's say f4. Here too, very nice, little final touch. King to e4 wins. So again, we still don't take the f6 pawn, but we just utilize this magnificent square. So this is really the focal point of this whole exercise. Okay, so we retreat back to this position here. So again, white's just pushed his pawn to f6, f5, king e5, f6, king f5, and once more, white has to resolutely avoid stepping on the g3 square and avoid giving black e4. So king e3 is the only move. All right, now here, black actually has to be careful, because if he goes after the h-pawn, now in fact he loses the game. King e4, king h4, king f5, king h3, king g5, h4, king h5. And black is in Zugzwang. He's got to give up his h-pawn, and it's just hopeless. So just to look at the variation quickly, king g2, both grab pawns, and white gets there with a tempo to spare. So if black could play king to e6 here, then in fact white would have gone too far and would lose. So it's just by one tempo, but one tempo is all you need. All right. So king to g4 loses, and you can think of it this way. Again, we've got a kind of a fundamentally symmetrical position, except for this pawn on f6. And just as the e4 square has really been critical for black in all these lines, well, if you play king g4, if black plays king to g4, well, now it's white who's getting this kind of central square and access to black's goodies in the position. So black, in turn, can't allow white to have access to that key square. So king to e5 is the right move for him. And now white finally has a choice. So I think there are three drawing moves here. The main one, the one that I came up with at the time, was simply king to f3. And here we just have to go back and forth. So king f3, king f5, and so on. But I'll point out the one very surprising variation that still shows a way for white to lose, and it's with f4 check. And it seems extremely improbable that white could lose here. Because now, after king takes f6, king e4, now there's no space advantage for white at all. So it's really, it just looks like there has to be some mistake. It seems like it should be impossible that black could be winning here. But in fact, he is. So king e6. Now, of course, if the white king retreats, then king f5 followed by f6 if necessary, and again the black king gets in and starts eating pawns. But it looks like f5 check should be completely fine. The problem is that black doesn't play king f6 but plays king d6, and after king to d4, f6. And white's king has to give ground, so if he goes to c4, of course that's no good. We just go to e5 and start collecting. While if king to e4, king to c5, so the king just comes around the corner, and next move is king to d5, and then he goes to e5. Maybe he has to go to d4 first and then e5, but same basic idea. And then he takes the pawn on f5. And then he can even win the h-pawn too after that. So it's kind of remarkable. I mean, it seems like a kind of an optical illusion that this position could be losing for white, but it is. So white's best, as I said, is king to f3, and black can't take on f6 because king f4 wins, so we just go back and forth. All right, so I hope you found this exercise interesting. This is something different, so it was an unusual show, and I look forward to your feedback on this. And again, like to know what you thought about the position as well. So I hope you enjoyed it and got a lot out of more out of your own work on it than what I just showed you. So this was by way of explaining and presenting, but of course you could have gotten the presentation using a chess engine, or at least could have found the solution with that. But hopefully the explanations were useful, and again, I hope you found a profitable exercise. So thanks a lot, everyone, and I'll see you next week. I think the next show is going to be a USCL Game of the Year wrap-up show, and then the week after that will be another one of these lectures. So thank you again. Let me remind everyone quickly to check out my blog, chessmind.powerblogs.com. It's also probably the best place for you to leave feedback on the shows too, so you can use the contact link on my blog, and I'll get that faster than I would get a message on here. Though you can do that too. So either way, thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.